Welcome to the Tuesday Review. I'm Nathan, as always, joined by Alum. How you going, Alum?
Good, happy to be here.
And I'm joined by Callum. How you going, Callum?
Not bad.
Not bad. Callum's dying inside. He doesn't want to be here tonight. We're doing it at home over Zoom. And he's like, I could be watching movies right now. Instead, I'm recording. He's taking his headset off. He's like, nah, I'm out here.
He's taking this hoodie off to
Yeah,
add to the ease of recording.
that's it.
We always appreciate the studio equipment that we get at the station, and sometimes you want to do a remote show. The quality isn't always up to the same.
Yeah, so James obviously can't be here tonight. But we're going to do a show anyway.
Yes.
We're just going to start off when Callum's finished rubbing his microphone.
I'm not touching it. I'm touching the webcam.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's just fine. We're messing. We've had a message from the Australian Speedrun Marathon, which has become the largest speedrun marathon organization in Australia. They, work with conventions like PAX, Game Expo, Comic Con, and basically they support two charities, I believe, or a charity called Game on Cancer, which is an initiative of Cure Cancer. It's an Australian-based charity, and they dedicate entirely to funding early career cancer researchers, which is, a really great cause. I think most people would have somebody that's affected by cancer in their life, and promoting research, looking for cures is a great initiative. So speedrunners, for those that don't know, try and get a game done as quickly
Usually
as
by
possible.
cheating.
Yeah, there are some glitchless ways, but there is an element of cheating. The goal is not to explore the story because most of these people have already played the game many times. It's more about literally seeing how quickly you can complete a game. And some of these games, the games end up minutes in some cases. That's how good the world records are.
Callum, try to keep the stuff away from the mic. Thank you. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, Alan. Continue.
And
He shake his head, man. You're gonna be listening to this recording, and all you can hear is like the mic just getting rustled.
If you haven't seen a speedrun before, I'd say pick a game that you enjoy, watch a speedrun of that, and you will be amazed at the kind of stuff people get up to in those games. Some of the game breaking things, people find through initiative. It's a great overall entertainment thing, and the fact that it's put in with a great cause, it's a great thing overall. They'll be running it in Adelaide from July 16th to the 21st, which is Tuesday to Sunday. It'll be a 5-day marathon.
And tickets
I
are
think
only
again,
$30 at the door.
yeah, and proceeds going to cancer research. So it's a great time. The particular games: Mario 64, Futurama, Undertale, Skyward Sword from Legend of Zelda, and Simpsons Hit and Run. Nice classic.
Yeah.
Again, if you've never seen these games being speedrun, it is really worth watching. Great thing to support. So you can just search up the Australian Speedrun Marathon, and we might put a few details in the YouTube description or the podcast description.
Yes, we sure will. So we're going to start off tonight by talking about the new Beverly Hills Cop movie, Beverly Hills Cop AXEL F, the new Netflix film. So, Alan, have you seen any of the other movies prior to this?
No, I haven't. So, again, don't you shake your head at me, Callum. I was raised under a rock, all right? But from, again, watching the movie, I got those hits of like, well, this is probably referring to previous films, that kind of thing. After I actually watched the movie, I did a little bit of research and I found out that the actors, all the actors that starred in, not all of them exactly, but the main actors that were in the original films were the ones that came back and did these ones.
Yeah.
Hence the use of like a really, really decrepit old man as like the police chief.
Yeah. But in a way, it is good. As like a fan of the original movies, it is nice to see those actors back in those roles, especially Judge Reinhold. The kind of I guess we'll call him the Luke Skywalker of this movie. They spent the whole movie trying to find him, right? And he, obviously he goes missing at the start. It's not a spoiler. That's the whole plot line. I guess the hunt for Billy, essentially. AXEL goes back to Beverly Hills because he reckons something's happened to Billy and his daughter, and that's kind of it spurs the whole case off. Have we lost audio?
No.
Okay,
Good.
very good. Yeah, so I, as a big fan of the originals, I was excited for this because I'd read all the stunts were practical, and they had that same ethos of like it feels like an 80s movie almost. They went back, they're like kind of like, how do we capture the spirit of those kinds of 80s buddy cop classics, which I really appreciate. The first two of the original movies are amazing, and the third one's crap. But if you
Okay.
did like it, Alan, I would suggest go back and watching the first two, and you'll see a lot of them in the AXEL F in hindsight.
And Eddie Murphy, like, he doesn't do the full, I guess we'll call it rock style thing where he plays himself in every movie, but Eddie Murphy does have a style. And very much this film had that Eddie Murphy, like older film style that a lot of people enjoy.
Yeah, like it doesn't reinvent the wheel, obviously. It's a Beverly Hills Cop movie, and it stays true to what made those movies fun. With the exception of 3, which I will hate on time and time again. That is not a good movie. Keep it in context, Alan. The best scene in Beverly Hills Cop 3 is when there's a George Lucas cameo. And he'd
Really?
already
That's
ruined
pretty
Star
sad.
Wars by this point. No, had he? No. When was Beverly Hills Cop 3? Had he destroyed Star Wars
94.
yet?
He'd already ruined it spiritually.
Yeah.
Spiritually. This is why we need James, just so he can add to the.
Yeah.
It would go off on a whole Star Wars tangent at this point.
Yeah.
We'd spend like half an hour talking about Star
But-
Wars, and it'd come back to be
but
like, oh yeah, by the way,
Being super
Beverly Hills Cop.
specific here, Alan, basically the entire third movie in the franchise is set in like a really weird kind of theme park, and it's crap.
Yeah.
And there's some sort of like
There's always one
I don't know if they're
in the
like
trilogy movies.
they're like gun running or drug running or something underneath the theme park, and it's absolutely just
It's all
silly.
coming. It's all
It's
coming
not a
back
good
to me
movie.
now.
Yeah, it's not. It's really not a good movie.
Yeah, that
There's like a whole
sucked.
conspiracy underneath the theme park, and I'm like, what is this movie? It's weird.
Yeah, no, that was
And
definitely one. That was a
obviously,
cash grab of a film.
Obviously, when they leave a trilogy like that and they want to start again, you're like, well, this could go one of two ways. Are they going to bring it back to the greatness that are the first two?
Yeah, especially getting like the age of all the actors, you're just like, is it just going to be a phone it in? Netflix is paying. Let's bolster our paychecks up for retirement time.
Yeah, being cynical, like Netflix, it's a Netflix movie. They could have easily just been like, yeah, sure, Netflix, give us $250 million. We'll spend a few dollars on CG and pocket the rest. Like it's not. They could have done it the lazy way. But if it was all practical or not, that's up for debate. But they did a lot of practical stunts in this movie, and they look
Yeah.
really nice. Like even at the start with the snow truck or whatever it was,
Yeah.
the snow plow,
Yep.
and like they're crashing through the alley, and there's like the cars. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
And they get a bit sillier, and there's a stunt involving like a mini, what is it, like the mini police cap, like the little
Yeah,
golf
the
cart.
parking meter
Yeah.
cop car.
And it's obviously going so slow, but they're kind of filming it like it's a high speed car chase, which is funny. It's pretty funny.
One of the things I liked, I didn't know a whole lot about this film going in, and I was surprised to see JGL, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, playing like the buddy cop in this film. And man, he's a handsome man. It's good to see him back in the leading role. I mean,
Was he a bit?
I say that like he hasn't been doing movies, but I haven't seen him in ages. Not in a high-profile movie.
Was he a bit wooden in this movie though? Did anyone else think he just had like the one kind of facial expression going on the whole time, or was that just me?
Well, I'm just trying to think of other Joseph Gordon-Levitt films, and I'm like, well, it's The Dark Knight Rises, and then it's Inception for me. So I'm like, in those he wasn't overly animated.
That's true.
He's good in Looper.
Yeah, he's good in Looper. But that's he's impersonating Bruce Willis, so it's like
he has the chin.
And the nose.
I gotta rewatch that movie. Yeah, I thought he was okay. He did what he had to do. Not every movie is going to be an Oscar-winning performance. And I didn't have a problem with his performance. It could have been stronger, but then the script could have been stronger. Maybe the director could have been stronger.
I feel the script was, I guess, not hobbling him, but kind of to keep.
He didn't. There wasn't
AXEL,
exactly. His character was there to keep AXEL on the right track. His character didn't have a whole lot of growth, really.
I think that was the weakest part of the movie is the script. And some of the dialogue is just cheesy and unnecessarily awkward in some places. And for me, the script was the weakest part. They could have done more. They could have had a bit more emotional depth. They could have had more kind of just like character moments, like between characters.
One of the problems I had with the film was there's a scene where they go to a bar, and then Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like, "We'll have 2 beers," and the guy just brings him a random beer, and I was like, "Come on, guys." Couldn't be like, I'll have a Bud Light. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, I'll take a beer. If you were to go to a bar, I'm sorry, Nathan. Nathan already told me this was a silly point to bring up. But if you were to just go to any bar,
I didn't say it's a silly point to bring up. I just don't think
I
it's
know.
that big a
I'm just like,
deal.
if you were to go to a bar, but yeah, I'll have a beer, please. I'll just look at you.
Yeah, they'd be like, which one, mate? I got like 50
Yeah, that's
beers
what I
back
said.
here.
It's for like 6. Yeah.
And it's the same now. Why wouldn't you just take the advertisement money?
Yeah.
Just be like, yeah, 2
Yeah, and
Coronas or
you can
whatever,
have
and
Eddie
just
Murphy hold up the beer and smile at the camera before he drinks it.
That would have been funny.
he puts on his like Prince accent from Coming to America. I have to ask at this point. So, as many of the listeners may know, Callum has face blindness, um, which we discussed thoroughly during our review of Dark Matter. Now, how much Jimmy Simpson were you actually seeing in the face of what's that gentleman's name? Just let me come up with Mark Pellegrino.
No, yeah, I said that. So in the top secret, heavily encrypted Tuesday review chat, I've made a joke. So as listeners might remember, I confused a character from Dark Matter with the devil in.
Two characters from Dark Matter.
Correct. But the one pertaining to this conversation is I conflated the guy from Westworld with the devil from Supernatural.
Yeah, so he confused Jimmy Simpson for Mark Pellegrino.
Yeah. And so when Pellegrino appeared in Beverly Hills Cop, I was like, oh look, it's the guy from Westworld. It's a joke.
Very good. Like I said in the chat, I was like, look, I'm like,
Look,
I'm not
all
100
I'm gonna
percent
say
sure
is
that this is a
all
joke.
white boys look the same to me.
And said, "You white, you Ben
Yeah,
Affleck,"
that's
to
it.
quote role models.
You white, you Ben
Yeah.
Affleck.
But yeah, so what were you impressed with the kind of physical nature of the stunts, Alan? Because
that was probably the best part of the film was like how everything was just. Yes, it was like 80s wacky.
sometimes
Late 80s,
that's
early
what the
90s.
heart needs.
Yeah, sometimes that's exactly right. Sometimes the
Gets
heart
the
just
people
needs
going.
a good wacky time, not a good whack.
But because
but
the thing is, this is the other side of that coin, is because they're actually doing it in the frame, they can seem lower stakes. They can seem a little bit quaint. They can seem like we're used to. I'm not like obviously Mission Impossible is exempt here because that's insane, right? He has a death wish, Tom Cruise. But you look at Fast and Furious, yeah, they use a lot of real cars, but there's also a lot of CG and the stakes.
right.
The use of CG to kind of accentuate or help
Augment.
these stunts. They make augment. That's the right word I was looking for. I guess they can make the stakes higher. They can make it seem like it's more dangerous. They can make it seem kind of out of this world. But when you're only doing it practical, that also kind of limits what you can show on screen too. So I'm like, some people might think it's a bit kind of small scale, a bit quaint, but I'm like, on the other hand, I feel like it's more thrilling because I know everything that I'm seeing is real.
Yeah.
Like the helicopter
And,
scene,
like,
for instance.
Yeah, like insanely good CG seldom exists. So when you're showing something with CG, like you're never spending as much money as you would on just decent,
And
decent real world
case
kind
in
of
point,
effects.
like we always talk about, Christopher Nolan blew up a plane because it was cheaper and more realistic looking than using CG.
Yeah, and he remade in a larger scale the same thing they used in Space Odyssey.
Yeah, Inception.
With
The
in
turning
Inception.
room. Yeah.
Yeah, to film that, like that stuff is damn expensive, but it makes the ultimate film
That's it.
because you see things that you otherwise just wouldn't.
Yeah. Obviously, Christopher Nolan's a good example of doing things practically when you can. But I'm like, yes, kind of people might be a little bit underwhelmed with some of the stunts because they're used to like, like
Over the
They're
top
used to
bullshit.
Atlas
the
with Jennifer
bullshit.
Lopez, which we reviewed recently.
Yeah, no, and a lot of people, and like it or not, a lot of people don't mind the crap CG, right? They want the kind of the high intensity action. And while I would say the helicopter scene is high intensity action, a lot of people might think it's a bit, it's only hovering 10 feet over the ground, but that's the dangerous part too.
Yeah,
So I think I really enjoyed it.
most aircraft are in the most danger right near the ground.
Yeah.
It's when they're flying up in the air, it's pretty chill. Like most problems can be sorted out. It's when you're, like you said, 10 feet off the ground, where something goes wrong, it goes sideways, literally.
Yeah, and
You
then
can chop a person in half.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then the helicopter blows up and people die.
Yeah.
And and that's happening. They're doing it on the screen. There's danger on the screen in front of you. But yes, obviously, they can't get everything right. Alum said one of the notable stunts where there's a car coming off a parking lot. He looked a bit sus to him.
Yeah, like to their credit, they claimed they actually closed part of the freeway there in real life to film that scene. So obviously the car probably went over the edge at the very least. But I think they did some editing and post and it made it look a little funky.
Yeah. Oh, look, that's what I said to Alum off air as well. I'm like, look, I'm sure there's going to be issues with that too when you're putting actors in danger. I'm like, yeah, they probably did the stunt with the car, but it was probably a dummy in the car, and then they kind of did some editing afterwards, and they put the lady in the car and just CG'd the fall in the background or something, so it looks a bit weird or whatever. But for the most part, I think they did a really good job of like you can see where the budget went with this movie,
Yeah,
and the picture
Can you
quality is
imagine,
nice too.
can you imagine applying to the city, be like, yes, we want permission to, dangerously fly a helicopter on the road, and they're like, what's it for? A movie? And they're like,
Yeah,
they
well,
got
you
permission.
see,
Yes,
you're making it out like it's not a
film.
Netflix lawyer who opens up a briefcase with like Marcellus Wallace's soul, like in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah,
You just see the gold, and then they're like stamp, approved
Yeah.
stamp.
exactly. Oh, and also I like the fact that they made an effort to shoot on location, even just for the normal scenes, the ground scenes. They shot in Beverly Hills. Like they didn't just shoot in a soundstage.
Yeah.
Like they went out into the environment, which is something again we don't see that much anymore. Like when you can shoot in a soundstage and it's cheaper, and they have the CG just to fake the street. That's what they do nowadays.
Yeah.
But it's good the fact that they took the risk of going into the public and filming on the streets and shutting things down. And it's a little bit of old-fashioned movie making that I appreciate. Onto the soundtrack. You obviously not being aware of the previous movies, Alan. Did you appreciate the theme, like the Beverly Hills Cop music?
All I could think of at the time was Peter Griffin going, and another,
Yeah.
like. And I went to that video on YouTube, and people were like, "Who's here after watching, Beverly Hills Cop?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah. But it is iconic. Like that
No, it
that
is
jingle
insanely
is
iconic.
yeah, it's very good. And the movie continues with that 80s kind of love with that synth score. Not trying to change it too much. Obviously, they modernized it a little bit, but it's still kind of synthy like the original 80s score was,
Yeah,
which is lovely. And also,
yeah. For the young
synths
kids, that's
coming
where the
back.
weekend gets his grift.
That's it. That's it. The synths are coming back, so it's a perfect time for a
Yeah.
synthy score in a movie anyway. But I'm glad all the homies enjoyed it.
I
I'm good
really liked
so
it.
far. We don't know what James
It was a
thinks.
solid movie.
We don't know what James thinks, but James is not here, so he gets a positive review from the Tuesday Review boys.
Look, I think it's
Uh,
it's one of those things where there are a certain type of, and this is not about James. There are a certain type of audience who just do not like sequels. They don't like reboots, that type of thing. Automatic, especially if it's a classic from the 80s, it's automatically on the back foot. And we all fall into that trap too sometimes. But I really liked it. I think that if you go in with an open mind, you might be surprised, especially because it now has the Netflix stigma attached to it. So it's not
Yeah,
only
there
is it
definitely is.
not only is it a reboot call, but it's also a Netflix original, which is a huge red flag for some people. Because like it's not a movie. You're not going to the cinemas to see it. It's turning on Netflix. You know what I mean? It's like yeah. Because Netflix
There definitely is.
they don't do home runs as much as they used to.
There definitely is the Netflix curse. So there definitely is people willing to just hate on it because it's a Netflix movie.
Yeah.
That is true.
But it was really
Yeah.
solid. I think Eddie Murphy does a pretty good, mature performance. It has some good comedic jokes. As Nathan said, it's cringe as well. Sometimes it's a little awkward.
No, sometimes it was funny though. Not all the comedy myths.
Yeah, no, there's a scene where he tries to convince Eddie Murphy's character AXEL tries to convince a valet to give him a car, and like he wants it, right? He lingers on it, and it's funny. I
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good scene, especially when the valet code switches.
Yeah.
They use the Edward on him.
Yeah, there's a lot of little moments that are funny, like Kevin Bacon plays a really great villain, and there's this whole thing where you watch too many movies. That I liked that running joke.
That's the other thing I appreciate about this movie. It wasn't a PG-13 reboot sequel. It was they had the script that they liked. Eddie Murphy swore a lot in this movie. He swore more than I thought he would, right? Even in like 2 and 3, I don't think he swears that much. But I'm like, this one, they just kind of let him have it. They're just like, you do what you want, man, and like he rolls with it, and it's great. And it makes some of the, childish or not, it makes some of the humor funnier
Yeah.
when he busts out
Yeah.
some of the swears.
And that's part of the beauty of not having to, cater to the Motion Picture Association as much, and have to be cinema friendly. Like it's just
Yeah, exactly.
the power of Netflix.
Yeah, no, they got the script that they wanted, and as you're saying with the valet speech, there was some language in there that was not appropriate for children, but it was very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, it's a good movie. I reckon you can go see it if you can. It's just on Netflix.
Can we, I guess, discuss a few spoilery things?
Go for it.
Yeah, we can do a spoiler alert.
All right, spoiler alert. Again, if you've watched the previous Beverly Hills Cops, I reckon you'll have a great time with this one. If you haven't, it's not a bad way to kind of get into the groove and be like, this is something I'm interested in. I'm sure the first two, then I'll probably end up watching sometime later on, and I'll have a pretty good time with them.
It's definitely a movie you can go like it doesn't spoil the first two. Like
Yeah.
it's not there's no plot spoilers. Like it's just
Exactly.
they're like isolated cases. So it's like you can definitely go back and rewatch the first two. You can skip three. But you go back and watch the first two, they're great movies and you won't be spoiled by watching these. Like watching the fourth one. Yeah, so we'll go into spoilers then. Kevin Bacon being the bad guy was kind of obvious from the start, I would say, because he's hamming it up. He's meant to be the kind of slimy villainous cop, right? So that wasn't a surprise. I did like the fact that, again, in an 80s fashion, he had those goons, like Case in the House. No, it was like a very 80s homage kind of thing to do because that's how the villains were in the 80s. They had the guys in the suits, like working, I guess, against your main character, like also searching for clues. And it's kind of they also the dress was very kind of reminiscent of the 80s movies and all that kind of stuff. They had the suits. It was all very kind of like an homage, but not in a kind of remember the 80s way, just in a filmmaking way, which was nice. I did appreciate that.
The one thing I'd say that I have a problem with was probably the cheesiness of, I guess, towards the end where they're in that final shootout and, like, what is his name? John Ashton comes in to save. Who's he? He's also Sergeant John something.
Oh, I'll have to look it up. I'm not entirely sure of all the characters' names.
Yes. So he comes in to save Judge Reinhold's character.
Yeah, Billy Rosewood.
Yeah. And then he comes in with the shotgun and stuff, and I'm like, he's a real old man.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
He's not going to get into it, but it's it was like, again, to just give him like the one last hurrah.
John
I
Taggart.
guess. Yes, John Taggart.
Yes, Chief John Taggart, played by John Ashton.
Chief.
Yeah.
But also when Kevin Bacon's Captain Grant goes to shoot Jane, who is AXEL's daughter, and he sees her and he's like, no, he does the whole dive.
Yeah.
I'm like, Devin, why you gotta do this cheesy, 80s, 90s
again, though, that's from the 80s. I'm not defending that, but these are things that happened in a lot of these movies, like one of the moments in that scene, those scenes, is apparently like a direct reference to like the first movie. So that kind of gets a pass, but I didn't pick it up when I was watching it. There's a scene where he's hiding behind a pillar and he like takes a shot or something, but that's like a direct recreation of like a scene from the first movie or something, which is just like a quick nod. You'll miss it if you don't know it kind of situation. But yes, there is a lot of cheesiness, but it can't be avoided.
Yeah, but I love it. Love it, mate.
The cliche of his daughter's like, I said some things, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
come talk to me, and then she gets kidnapped, and I'm like,
I mean,
it was a very cliche story.
Also, I'm just saying, I'm like, man, if your dad comes back into your life after 30 years and was like, I tried to be the best dad I could,
No,
I'm like, no, mate, don't say. I'll see you later. Like, like I don't know you. So there is that kind of, they try to wrap up a very complicated relationship.
Yeah, because like the way they behave is like it's now just it's good.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not good. It's like, okay, look, we can try and reconcile, but we need some family therapy.
Yeah,
and we need some counselling going on here.
yeah, especially
Because
with all the PTSD that be going around in that family. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
there's incidences that happen, lives are endangered, things happen, there's be some trauma. It wouldn't be this clean, but obviously there was this movie magic. We're talking this movie land, so they have to wrap
and
everything up nicely.
given that AXEL is old in the universe as well, his own counterparts are either captains or retiring captains, that kind of thing, or chiefs, sorry, deputy chiefs, that sort of thing. Whereas Axel's just like, nah, man, I'm a beat cop. I'm gonna do the thing. Like, he didn't even learn his lesson towards the end. I feel like he's just like, I'm still gonna do it. I'm not gonna quit.
Well, you should watch the second movie in which Billy Rose was nuts.
Yeah,
That's you think it goes a bit crazy. This movie, you should see the second movie is when they're all on coke. It's the height of the 80s, and they're just like Billy Rosewood, because he even mentions it like in the end of this, at the end of the movie, he's like, "Give me the biggest gun," kind of thing, right? He's like that. He's the epitome of that character. He has like the Rambo knife. He's like insane. In the second movie, it gets even bigger. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I'm glad they didn't have CG back then, because I'm like, they're blowing up trucks, they're doing all kinds of crazy shit in the second movie. I think you'd love it.
Yeah,
But they touch on it a little bit in this.
I was thinking about that towards the start of the film when they're doing all the wacky stuff, and he has like the bigger gun and stuff, and I'm just like, I'm thinking of The Simpsons where it's like, I don't want to hear it, McBain. Your gun's not up to code and all that, and he's like, who cares, Chief? I'm trying to catch the bad guys, just breaking all the rules.
Yeah, I did appreciate the scene where, like, that mansion scene at the end where they drive the truck through the entrance.
yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah,
I didn't rewatch it, but how much of that do you reckon was practical and how much of it was CG? It looked fairly practical, but it's also probably the most dangerous scene.
Well, like I'll say again,
Usually.
it's not about whether it's real or not, Nathan. How does it make you feel?
Makes me feel pretty
It
good.
makes you feel worried. You're like, somebody could have died. No,
Like I said earlier, Nathan gets the people going.
it does. It does get the people going.
It does.
The problem is, I think, like you said, there'll be a certain cast of people where they're like, one that wasn't big enough and explosive enough, and another cast of people are like, oh man, this is so again, immature and kind of old school.
Yeah.
But who cares? Like you said, it's if you can kind of put that aside and be like, I'd like to remember Very, but like, I like to watch something that kind of had this feel of that time. It's not a bad watch, and it still does modernize certain
In terms
things.
of
it modernizes it in production, but it feels like an 80s kind of buddy cop movie in the best possible way.
In terms of using CG to augment things and whatever, I'm like, considering it's not a big Marvel movie which uses it egregiously, even if there was some CG which looks awful, and I'm not saying there is, but even if there was that Escape Plan 2 moment, you know what I mean, where it's like the PS2 graphics with the bricks, even if that was in there, it's like you can still say, okay, this is a good movie. It's some bad CGI, but how much am I enjoying this film? How much can I forgive the use of this CGI?
Yeah.
And in a film like this, there's a lot of room for forgiveness because they're trying their best to do as physical as possible, as real as possible, and harken back to the 80s. It's, it could have been so easy for them to have a million CGI shots. It would have saved them probably a little bit of money to a little bit of, if not money, effort, for the location scouting and all the permits required and this, that, and everything else. But like Nathan was saying, they went to location and they did it. So it's like, even if there is bad CGI or there's like, that take looks weird or whatever, it's like, who cares? They tried. It's a fun movie.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah. So look, it's an interesting movie. I think people should go watch it. It is a fun time. It is worth your time. It's on Netflix, so you don't have to go far to see it. There's rumors. I haven't been able to look it up properly, but there's rumors that if it does well, that Eddie Murphy wants to make another one. And if it's with the same team, it could be a good idea. But then they also run the risk of ruining it again, right? If you get someone else who's making it, if the director changes or the showrunner or whoever's in charge of it changes and they just CG everything, it'll be terrible.
I think if they were going to do another one, they'd probably keep the same team.
I would hope so.
Because someone like Eddie Murphy would only do a movie that he liked. I can't imagine a celebrity like him just signing on for a paycheck. So I imagine they would have had a fun time making this one because it came through in the film that they had fun. That's what it felt like. I'm watching it and I can see they're having fun on screen. You know what I mean? So I imagine that they'd get the same crew together.
The only concern I have with that is that obviously this movie came out 20 years after the last one. So there's been time to digest and I guess, look back at the films, even though number 3 is crap. How, given the overall premise of this being like, a Beverly Hills Cop,
Yeah.
the opportunity for it to get pretty stale is very real.
Yeah.
Especially again, this is the 4th movie already. Yes, it's been a while. I feel like it's a good place to just leave it as well.
Yeah. Producer, according to Screen Rant, producer Jerry Bruckheimer and Eddie Murphy confirmed plans for a 5th film, but its official status depends on the success of AXEL F, so the 4th movie.
Well,
So I guess time
that
will
sounds
tell.
good. If Eddie Murphy's involved in like the production level, they must have like an arc planned around it. Like I imagine maybe there's like one more movie to send him off, the character off. So it could be good. We'll see. If it probably will never get there
Yeah.
because Netflix cancel all their good things anyway.
But again, it also ends in a way where, as Alan was saying, you can also just leave it. It's not going to be the end of the world if we don't. We still got a really good movie in 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we'll move on. Callum and myself recently saw the Bikeriders as well, which I think one you'll enjoy, Alan. It's a movie about, I guess, the origins of rebel outlaw motorcycle gangs
Called the Vandals.
through a fictional outlaw motorcycle gang called the Vandals. So it starts with the origins
fictional?
through kind of just like the club is fictional. It's inspired by like people from different clubs and stuff like
Oh,
that.
my bad, because I thought it was
But,
like a true story.
No, it is a true story, but they've just fictionalized the actual names of the club and stuff like that. But the actual club in the movie is called the Vandals, inspired by real clubs.
Oh, it's a
and it's
fictional
kind of
version of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club.
Yeah. So I guess it chronicles the kind of origin of these motorcycle clubs through the start of like post World War II, kind of just like motorbike racing. When the men would go and they would race motorbikes just to hang out, and then eventually it's like, we need a place to hang out. Let's go to a bar, and then that's a motorcycle bar, and it kind of just follows the evolution of these kinds of things up to basically like criminal gang stuff.
Yeah.
And it shows how it got there. And like, it's a really interesting movie because it chronicles like Tom Hardy plays his best Marlon Brando impersonation. He plays the leader of one of the first of these gangs, and he isn't, they show the character. He is inspired by watching The Wild One with Marlon Brando, and like he sees this movie and he's like, yes, that is who I want to
from
be in my life.
1953.
Yeah.
It's a funny scene where a journalist asks one of the protagonists, "How did Benny get the idea to start the gang?" And then it cuts to him watching The Wild One, and Marlon Brando says something, and Benny just repeats it, and then that's when it hit me. I'm like, is Tom Hardy like pretending to be Marlon Brando in his
Tom
delivery?
Hardy is
And it's hilarious.
Tom Hardy's playing a man. Tom Hardy's playing a man who's inspired to pretend to be Marlon Brando. It's a bit meta.
Yeah, it's funny.
But it's very good. It's not quite Robert Downey Jr. pretending to be a
Yeah.
it's not quite that
Yeah,
level.
that's peak. That's peak acting.
But it's about halfway. Because it's like Benny has like a family at home, and then he's like Marlon Brando in The Wild One outside the home. And then you got Austin Butler, who is almost the weakest part of this movie. He plays like the young kind of
Brash,
I guess
silent type.
We'll call him the prince character to Benny's king, right? He's the kind of the charismatic younger kind of go-getter of the Outlaws, the Vandals. But I struggled with his performance because he only has like the one look on his face.
Yeah, it's real Zoolander.
I'm unsure.
It's real Zoolander vibes.
I'm unsure if that's just him as an actor or if that's just what the role required. I haven't seen many of his movies. I have a feeling he probably did much the same with Elvis, but he gets a pass because Elvis only had one facial expression, right? So it's like, well,
I don't know.
I don't know. So I haven't watched many of his movies, so I can't really comment other than the fact that I found it was quite weird how there was just like really one note kind of performance for me.
Yeah, but mate, he's smoldering. That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, but he's good looking and hot,
Yes,
so
dude.
that excuses everything.
He's a leading man. You leave him alone. Doing his best. Do you know how hard it is to be beautiful?
Yeah, we can only imagine. But
look, he's the same guy that played Fade throughout the
He did well in that movie. He did well in that movie. So maybe it's just this movie that he didn't want to be part
Maybe
of.
you know what?
I don't know.
Maybe he did perfect, and that's what the script called for. I ever thought about that?
That's also true. Maybe he just followed direction.
Yeah,
I don't
maybe
know.
he's like a brilliant actor.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it's very Scorsese inspired. There's a lot of Scorsese in this movie.
Yeah,
Like even from the kind of it has that classic Goodfellas kind of narration,
yeah,
the casino kind of narration over the top. It has
it's very good, fellas.
it has the kind of the shtick of being like it's an interview and then they cut back to the past. So it's kind of got a bit of that element to it, which is nice. It's narrated through interviews essentially, the movie. And then there's the kind of the very Martin Scorsese kind of soundtrack of like blues and like rock music. There's very inspired by Marty. There's a lot of Martin Scorsese in this movie, in a good way, because he hasn't done something similar in a while. But yeah, just thought I'd mention it. It is a good movie. I'm not sure if it's still playing at the movie theaters, but it's out on video on demand if you go looking for it too.
Yeah, I think it is available.
It's an excellent film. I was very happy with it. Um, is it on the longer side? I can't remember. It's like 2 hours, so it's not really.
It's about 2 hours. It's not too long.
I thought it was a compelling drama. What I thought was interesting about it was it made me realize very mild spoilers for the Bike Riders. Not really, but like contextually, I guess subtextually, I should say, spoilers for the Bike Riders. Because it's the story of a club through its like I guess like half of its lifespan. It deals with what happens when soldiers come back from Vietnam and join the biker gangs, and there's this moment where the leadership of the gang has to reckon with the fact that half of the gang is like the old boys who just want to drink beer and ride their bikes, and the other half are like addicts and people who experienced trouble in Vietnam, and they do drugs and they're kind of crazy. And it's like this, how does that work? How do the soldiers reintegrating into society and joining the gangs? What happens? What's that conflict like? And I was like, that's something
Well,
I never thought about. Is like the impacts that these, for lack of a better term, unhinged people would have on what used to be criminal organizations, but also less inclined to outright violence at the drop of a hat. There was more of
well,
a
that's
an honor
it was more
code.
they just yeah.
I thought that was fascinating.
Like it would have been more like just because they're, I guess, having fun with their bikes and that sort of thing, they end up falling outside of the law on that front.
Yeah,
Whereas, like you said, with groups of people coming in that are probably have severe psychological issues due to things they saw,
and the drugs and the drug
some
and the
things they
drugs
did,
and stuff like
and the drugs,
like
like that's a different like you're purposely kind of breaking the law group.
Yeah, and that's kind of the movie. One of my problems in the movie is I felt it got a bit messy towards that back half when that kind of element of the plot comes into it. But I also think that's kind of the point. Like that
losing
loss of control is
Yeah,
the
that's
point.
exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, as Benny and the other main characters, they kind of lose control
Yeah,
of
because not only do these
organization.
people join, the gang starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger as these people join it. So it becomes this giant monster. Yeah.
And they have this whole thing in the gang where essentially you can challenge for the leadership of the gang, right? So as Benny and Johnny, try and I guess keep the gang together, and anyone can challenge leadership. You got these crazy people coming in, and they're like, "I'm challenging leadership," So it's kind of just like it's a very tight rope of how does Johnny maintain control as an especially later in the story, he's an aging character, right? He's older. So you've got all these younger people coming in from Vietnam. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're more violent. And how do you kind of, I guess, just keep control of a group of people that are A, not well, B, inclined to violence, and C, see your organization as, I guess, weak and in need of
Stronger
restructuring and
toughening up.
Yeah, toughening up and using your established organization to do criminal acts and violence. And that's kind of what I guess the back half of the movie is about, mild spoilers. But without going into detail, obviously bikie gangs don't have the most positive reputation in society, so it shouldn't come as a shock that, when you're watching a movie about the chronicle of said bikie gangs, it delves into some criminal activity.
You're telling me motorcycle gang actually means gang?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
But anyway, it is a good movie. I think
Yeah,
people should
I
go
liked
see
it a
as
lot.
well.
It's up there. It's now in like my canon of gang movies. If you like
Yeah.
Sons of Anarchy, I think you really enjoy this film because it has a lot of that DNA.
Have you been watching anything recently, Alan?
I have started on the House of the Dragon season 2.
Very good.
It follows up on, let's say, a pretty heavy thing that happens at the end of season 1. So
You
I'm not
enjoying it?
gonna spoil it. Yeah. I still feel raw about it some aspects because what happened to Game of Thrones. I think I discussed it last time. But obviously, this is being run by the same people. Dan and Dave have been fired and sent
Is
away.
George
So
involved?
yes, he is involved.
I'll
He'll
say,
do
God forbid
anything.
he finished the book.
You do anything
Any
but write his book, yeah.
write his fucking book. Excuse my language. Uh, but yeah, he is definitely heavily involved, and so the overall story, like, it's nothing as juicy as the Game of Thrones books were, but it's a good time if you still kind of have that itch of,
Yeah.
the Game of Thrones world of Westeros and Essos and everything else.
Very good. If you have nothing else to say on that, we'll move on.
Yeah.
Myself and Callum have been addicted to a brand new video game.
Here we have.
It's a free-to-play video game. Now, it's a Chinese company, but they say they operate out of Singapore and London and America, but it's owned by the Chinese, right? It's, I believe the CCP owns a stake in the company. I will double check
Jesus
that.
Christ.
I will double check that.
The company is
will
MiHoYo, and they released their brand new game, Zenless Zone Zero. This is the company that created Genshin Impact, famous for ripping off Breath of the Wild and making bank. And they also made Honkai Star Rail, which also made bank. And this new game is also making bank because everything they release turns to gold. Because you know what, it might be a gacha game. Like the concept of you get pulls, as they call them as we call it in the industry, which is you're just paying money to get loot crates basically. But man, their games are world class. They're AAA. They're fun. They look great. They sound great. If you make a good game, the nerds will come. And this one is it's like a retro science fiction action game with like cyberpunk elements, and it has like a chill hop soundtrack, and it's just cool. Like that's the word I would use to describe it. It's so cool. Yeah, it's awesome. Very very fun game.
So so I guess the history of this company is complicated because people in the company, some high-level people in the company at one point or are currently quite high up in the Communist Party. But then they've also
Yeah.
tried to distance themselves from the Communist Party by moving their company to Singapore. So
Well,
with anything, I guess,
Jackie
politically
Chan's been in the
related,
Jackie Chan's been in the Communist Party too. I mean, like in the government, and so I'm not gonna hold it against him. I'm still gonna watch his movies.
No, we're not making political commentary
Yeah,
here.
no.
But
I'll give the Chinese my money
it,
just fine. Don't you worry.
that's it. But it's
Like I don't buy off Temu. Come on.
they have everything. They have all our information anyway. Am I right?
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. Is MiHoYo the company that also recently launched a fusion reactor?
I don't know.
Yeah, they.
I feel that's a bit of a leap, video games and then
Yeah.
nuclear energy. But
MiHoYo
I guess
MiHoYo is a major investor in Energy Singularity, a startup dedicated to exploring commercialized fusion technology.
Fair enough.
And nuclear reacted, funded and built by Genshin Impact developer. Yeah, they
okay. So they are funding it. They're not.
Yeah, well,
They don't have their own staff working it.
I don't know. I'll put something in the Discord, our private Discord, and then Alan can have a look and see if it becomes operational. There you go. The nuclear reactor, according to Sportskeeda, I don't know what this site is. Nuclear reactor funded and built by Genshin Impact developer MiHoYo becomes operational. So I'm just saying they're branching out
they're in all
in weird directions, which I guess is the freedom allowed to you when you are like.
they're an awesome game
I guess with
development
the
company.
freedom allowed to you.
You
I guess if we also made billions of dollars a year, we also could have our own nuclear reactor, I guess.
Of all the things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Anyway,
Fair
so
enough.
this company obviously has more money than necessary. But they're a weird company. I think I've talked about them before on the show because they make they're essentially single player games, which you can invest. They're completely free to play, but you can invest extra money into, I guess, boosting your luck in certain areas and unlocking different characters. But they never make you feel forced to do it. Like I bought the battle pass, right, because I want to support the game, but you can still, they give you enough in the game in terms of premium currency for free that you can still do everything that the paid option allows anyway.
Yeah.
And I have not felt with this new game, Zenless Zone Zero, the need to buy anything. And the story is good, and it's like a mixture
Yeah.
of like a Persona and some sort of like
Even if you
Platinum Soft action game.
If you go all the way back to Genshin Impact,
Okay.
that story was good too. They're actually a very solid development team. They have good ideas and they take their time and they release good products, which is strange because it's like such a commercial enterprise. On paper, it's a soulless commercial enterprise. But then when they actually release their game, it's like last year, Honkai Star Rail was like my top 3 games of the year. Again, it's a gacha game. I should not be rating it that high. It should be like bottom 10 of games released in that year.
Yeah.
But again, the quality is just good.
But they have the secret sauce where they're like, if we make a good
People
game,
come.
we'll make 24 extra characters that people can play with if they unlock them for, either purchasing real money or just using their in-game currency. People will play it, right? It's like, it's that kind of thing where they're not really making the game with intent to get kids hooked.
Yeah.
They're making a perfectly serviceable, perfectly fine, complete single-player game and just having some paid options. And that's why they're quite probably the biggest mobile developer on the planet.
And it's funny because
the game comes first prior to the gambling.
It's funny,
which we've talked about. We talked about on the old show, Alan, the Saturday show, the Sunrise Arcade show. We had episodes dedicated to how we hated loot boxes and gambling in video games, right?
Yeah. Even though we still partook.
Yeah, exactly. We're not paragons of virtue here, but we can understand it's bad.
When we went to Comic-Con, there were quite a number of booths which were authorized MiHoYo dealers, because what they do is they don't just make a video game, they make an IP and they monetize that IP. So it's like you can go there and you can buy like Funko Pops or little anime dolls of like your Genshin Impact character or whatever your favorite guy is. And then I don't know if they made anime based on Genshin Impact or not. Did they, Nathan?
Yeah, there is Genshin Impact
but
anime.
like, you know what I mean? Like they make worlds. So even though they'll release a game, they'll then turn that game into an anime, or they'll release all kinds of toys related.
Genshin Impact has books. It has all kinds of crap with it.
Yeah, so it's like that's they definitely know how to craft a world, and then make money off it, not just the game.
And I don't really have that big of an issue with that because you're giving your fans more content.
Oh yeah.
And kind of reaping the reward, or in some cases, like you said, with the Funko Pops and stuff like that, tangible kids
and
stuff.
like their character designs are like top tier, man. Like you look at some of the character designs, and I'm not an anime simp at all. I'm not really like an anime. I mean, I am an anime guy, but I'm not like the most anime guy, if that makes sense. That's a clumsy way of putting it. But like some of these character designs, because it's anime characters, it's like Nathan said, it's Persona style art design. Some of these character designs, and like even if like this, like the random chicks they have in the world, like the heroes you can get, they're just so well done in like the way their characters are presented, the personalities they have, the weapons they use, like they're all,
and each character feels
and they're all themed. Like there'll be like 3 different characters who are with an organization, and they all complement each other in terms of gameplay style, aesthetics, personality type, like the way they interact with each other. It's so well done. And it's like that in all of their games, not just this one.
You'd probably like it, Alan, I reckon. You'd like it. The actual combat is action heavy and twitch heavy, so a large part of the combat is parrying attacks.
Yeah, but if it's
so it has just a little bit of that. It has a little bit of that Souls energy because you can dodge and parry, and that's how you build up the most combo points.
One of the reasons I like it is because it has an audio cue for when you have to dodge instead of just being a visual cue. I'm terrible at visual cues, but I know that when I hear that cue, I press my R1 button. And then I can usually get it. Yeah. And then you learn by using the audio cue, you get better at getting the physical cues, if that makes sense. Like I know that some people prefer the physical cues to, you know what I mean? But
the visual
cues, yeah.
Considering the game is free to play, like you're not losing much. Maybe some private information, but
yeah, well,
but that's
I played on PS5, so they can harvest all the PlayStation data they want off of me.
You lose all your private information from other games too.
Yeah,
everyone's selling your data to somebody.
Even us.
That's it. I will say,
the one thing
data. like all of one of their games has a shtick, right? Genshin's the big one, and that came out on the head. That's the oldest one, and that came out on the trails basically of what
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild, right? It gave people that Breath of the Wild experience essentially for free.
And much bigger.
They also monetize that. They also monetize that the hardest, but that's that was their first game. The second one is more of a straight like proper turn-based RPG, and the third one it has that Persona kind of shtick to it, where you get to a certain point in the game and there's morning, midday, night,
Yeah.
and midnight.
Different
And then
tasks.
different events occur in the city. Different tasks happen in the city at different points in the day. So it very much that Persona kind of
Yeah.
you're living. It's like that. You've got that battle section where you go into like the dangerous areas, but then you've also got like the kind of lifestyle / city management aspect of it,
Yeah.
where you're like doing things in the city,
Yeah, like
helping people
your
out,
character
exploring.
runs the protagonists run a video rental store, and like part of the game is like you have to like who are you going to get to promote the store, and what are your videos of the day going to be.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
mean,
little
look, as
stuff
people
like
who
that.
enjoy movies, obviously, we're just like, oh, mate, you had me at running a movie store.
That's it.
Anyway, we've been waffling on about this game long enough. I just thought I'd mention it because it's something that I've been doing quite a lot the last couple of days. Anyone else have anything they want to share?
Yeah, real quick. I watched a couple horror movies which I haven't seen in a while. I watched Signs with Mel Gibson. Man, what a great film! One of M Night's best. Such an amazing movie. I loved it. Hadn't seen it in years. So it's like if you haven't seen M Night's early work, definitely go check it out. Considering that he's about to be in vogue once again with the Trap, whatever his new movie's called.
Yes,
and his
Trap.
daughter released the
Yeah.
watches, of course. So that's going on. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was just distracted by a download on my PC that I hadn't realized. And I watched Evil Dead from 2013, the reboot / remake of the Evil Dead. I'll spare listeners because I'm pretty sure we talked about it. We argued about it on the Evil Dead Rise review, where I other people on the show hated it, think it's despicable, and I think it's actually a really good movie. And I rewatched it, and man, I still love it as much. I thought it's scary, it's great. Yeah, I'm all done.
Very good. Have you got anything for class, Alan?
No, I think that's everything for
That's
this
it?
episode.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back next week. You can catch the Tuesday Review on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Newsmast, and Blue Sky, and YouTube at Tuesday Review AU on all platforms. We also have Letterboxd. I'm Nathan B_90. James is channeldrifter. Alum is Alum20.
Yep.
And Callum's is Callum Tuesday. Thanks for listening again. I'll be back next week. Adios, cousins.